Hey everybody, Dr. Ray, and we are going to be talking about 20 things that I have observed over the last 20 years in instructional design. I've been in the field for, like almost over 20 years now, which is just mind-boggling to me. I just can't believe that. It's like crazy. I just been in the field too long. But I've noticed a lot of things throughout the year. Some things have stayed exactly the same and some have changed significantly. And so I've been doing some reflection on my career lately, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to make a video where I talk about different things that I've observed in the field in the last 20 years. Some things that have stayed the same and some things that have changed. All right, you ready for the 20 things? And my list is probably a little more than that, just so you know. All right, you ready? Okay. So first thing, the software that I was using 20 years ago is not the same software I'm using today. However, the software functions exactly the same. Like the end user is basically seeing the same thing that they were 20 years ago when I started. When I first started, we were using Flash. Flash and software like Director, Toolbook, and Authorware were being phased out, and Flash was coming up on the scene. Software today basically does exactly what I was doing 20 years ago. It's just much quicker and much easier. But I've had to relearn software several times in those 20 years, like new things that have come out. Like there's always new software, new tech coming. Another thing that's changed is training now needs to be viewed on many different devices. You know, when I first started, it was like, we developed for like this, what was the size? It was like 768 by like 1020 or so. I don't even know. I'm just making up those numbers. I can't even remember what it was. It was so long ago. But there was like a standard size that you developed everything for. Now it's like, man, it's got to be available, work well on the phone, on the tablet, the computer. It's got to work everywhere. So we're really developing for multiple devices where we didn't have to do that. So responsive development is much more important than it was. Just everything was developed for the PC. It was like 1068 by something. Everything. All right. I've learned that learning instructional design is much more important, has better longevity than software. Software is the easy part. I can teach someone to learn Articulate and Captivate in a couple hours. They can be pretty good at it. In fact, my 11-year-old can develop he could develop an awesome instructional design portfolio in Captivate or Articulate in a day. He would have it done. But what's learning ID hasn't changed. So for example, my ID course that I had 20 years ago probably hasn't changed too much from what it is today. ID's still done the same. Yeah, we have some new buzzwords like agile and things like that, but ID itself hasn't changed. We're still talking about ADDIE from the 70s, right? But the software has all changed. So ID has much better longevity than software. And I was just having a conversation with someone about this the other day that why it's more important to have lots of ID foundation as part of a graduate program than just software. Because if you have just software, everything you learned will be outdated in 5 years. So that's kind of crazy. All right, I've learned that people are still confused about ADDIE. People still don't know what it is. I see so many incorrect things spoken about it and said online. Someone's talking about replacing ADDIE, which is ridiculous. Someone's talking about what's your favorite model, and they list ADDIE in there. Look, ADDIE's a framework. You cannot replace it. It is a framework. You cannot replace it. All these other versions like Dick and Carey and Assure and whatever else you want to use are just talking about different ways to perform ADDIE. ADDIE is a framework. You can't do design before you've done some kind of analysis. There's time, and you can't do things. You can't have 2 p.m. before 1 p.m. has occurred. It just will never happen. Regardless of how many different people have tried to tell me that they do things differently, when they go through and do it, I say, so you are doing analysis. So you are then doing design. Then you're developing, regardless of what they try to, squiggly lines they try to show me on the map. When we go to practice it and they explain to me what they've basically done ADDIE. All right. Next thing. No one knows what we should be called still. This one's hilarious. Like, so when I was first starting, it was the big thing was instructional technology versus educational technology. No one knew. And apparently before that, it was instructional design versus instructional technology. Then, as the years have progressed, it was a bunch of different things. There was like the whole when I was working on my doctorate program, should we be called the learning sciences? Then it was learning engineering about like 5 years ago, and now it's learning experience designers. So people who think you're one of the things now, get ready, because in like 2 or 3, 4, 5 years from now, it's going to be someone else creating a new buzzword that thinks we should be called that. So just get ready. It will happen because it continually does. All right. And we're still fighting over the name. No one can agree what it should be. I've always said I hated the word instructional design. It's a terrible name for us. But I will accept it because that's what we do, I guess. So until we come up with a better one that everyone can just agree to, that's what we are. All right. People still think, including my wife, that I can fix their network, repair their computer, get rid of their viruses, install a network to a building. People have no idea what we do still. That has not changed. So yeah, people still think they can give me a bunch of cards and I can just solder them together and build a computer. People still think that's what we do. All right. One thing that I've noticed that's good is across the field now, everyone's in agreement that learning styles are a myth. They don't exist. They are nonsense. Geez, that took 15 years. It took a lot of time and a lot of people saying they exist. And finally we're at the point where we realize that they don't. So everyone seems to know that. Every program seems to know that. Now it's the big thing where everyone's the myth about learning styles. Whereas 10 years ago, I was do you know the myth about, and they were what are you talking about? Everyone was mad at me for saying it was a myth. I called it a unicorn. I said it was a unicorn in education, and people were angry about that. All right. But having said that, there's still a lot of snake oil out there. There's the people talking about replacing Addy. They've got the next big thing. There's people talking about they've invented a new field that is instructional design, but they call it something different. We've got people saying, I've got the best way in the world to do design or development or analysis. And it's dude, the best way is whatever is best for your current project. Okay, so there's still that. So there's a new trend. So this is something that's new. And actually, this isn't new. I had a conversation. And let me tell you about my conversation, and then I'll tell you what the thing is. So I had a conversation with a guy. I was getting promoted. I was at Booz Allen Hamilton. I was a consultant. That was a level. So there were 5 levels in the consultant firm. Level 1 was consultant. Level 2 was senior consultant, associate, senior associate. Then it was partner. Or it was principal, and then you could become a partner on top of that. So there was level 5 was 2 levels. Okay, so I was having this conversation. I was going up for my promotion to senior consultant, and I was doing this after 8 months, which was unheard of where I was. It was super. I got lucky, got put on a project, and was able to do a lot of PM project management stuff. So I was going to get promoted early. So I was going up for promotion. I was talking to someone who's going to do my review. And he was you're a trainer. Anyone just does training, right? You just do it. You just develop the and he was not a trainer. So that mindset, that conversation always stuck with me, how he was just so adamant that anyone just goes and you just develop the training. Anyone just goes and develops it. We still have that mindset in our field even. For some odd reason, there's always been this trend, this belief, and I feel it's even bigger now, that you don't need to be trained to be a trainer. You just do it. I go on the Reddit, instructional design Reddit, and there's a lot of people on there that are just I want to get an instructional design, and every response is just build something pretty and captivate, and you're golden. It's you're going to tell people, your job is to tell people they need to be trained on stuff, and you don't think you need to be trained at all. I can't figure that out. It's if you don't think you need to be trained, you might as well be in companies and just say to them, hey, don't get trained on any of this. Your employees will figure it out. We know that does not work. That's why there's so much bad quality training out there. As it is, there's tons of it. In fact, I always use like say 99% of training is terrible. It really is bad. There's so much bad stuff out there. Just go get trained how to do it at the very least. Oh my goodness. Okay. Something I've learned and pretty recently is that, and this kind of goes on to the next thing, is that adding a degree, so having the master's degree, actually does two things. It actually helps you make more money. So on average, we find that people who have the master's degree in instructional design earn $3,000 on average per year, and it helps with better career longevity. What do I mean by that? I mean, it's much easier to transfer jobs, because the degree in a lot of, especially like government or higher ed, they require the master's degree, but it helps you transition jobs if you're going to a new company. Like let's say you get a company without the degree, you get a job, but like that job goes away in 2 years. Will you find the next job without it? It's I don't know. And that's a little scary. So, I always talk about like in 2008, 2009, when the economy tanked, I've talked to other instructional designers that experienced the same thing, that your only option was really military government type jobs, and you needed the master's degree. So it helps with career longevity. All right, so that's another thing. I've learned that there's a huge focus on the portfolio. However, and I had one when I graduated with my master's. I still have one today. What I've learned about the portfolio after sitting and hiring numerous instructional designers, talking to numerous companies. In fact, I'm meeting with my advisory board, which is going to have about 20 different companies on it next month. And we're actually talking about this exact topic, portfolios. What I've realized is that no one is looking at your portfolio until you're a finalist. Let's say I put a job out there and I get 100 different applicants. Do you think that I'm going to sit there and look at 100 different portfolios? In fact, a lot of times HR sorts through those resumes and then sends me the better ones. Do you think HR is going to look through those and has any idea what they should even be? No, they're looking for a few keywords and then sending them to me. That's what happens. Your portfolio does matter, but it does not matter until you're a finalist. Your interview skills are almost more important, because they're going to get you to that final page. Having a degree and experience in the field, your interview skills, the way you can present yourself, the way you can show your resume is also as important as the portfolio. And it's funny because I see like these like surveys out there like asking like hiring managers like, was the portfolio important? But that's all they asked. They didn't say, was the interview question, the way the person responded to the interview, was that important? They didn't ask that question. They only asked about the portfolio. Of course it was important for hiring someone. But no, did you look through all 100 candidates' portfolios? No, that question was never asked before. Why? Because no one's doing it. Okay. Next thing I've learned. There's a wealth of free knowledge out there. Tons of it. There are so many good free instructional design materials out there. YouTube videos like mine, LinkedIn, books like my free book, blogs, all kinds of groups. There's so much free stuff out there. I do not believe that you should be paying for any instructional design materials unless you're getting the degree, like it's something that's actually going to look good on your resume. I don't think it's worth it for you to pay for it because it's all free out there. Tons of it. Another thing that I've learned is that innovation in our field is taking something we already do and giving it a buzzword. And I see this in other fields too. But we really think that innovation, and people were praised for innovating by just doing the exact same thing we've already done and just calling it something else. And I talked a little bit about that. Like using words like, oh, we're going to Scrum or whatever it happens to be, like whatever the hot way to have a meeting is at the time. But that's what we do. Okay. Most LMSs out there, regardless of what one you're using, function exactly the same. They have 95% of the features they have are exactly the same as the other one you were using. They all pretty much function the same. And they have for many years. Yes, they've added some new features. Yes, there's like certain things that maybe stand out on one versus another. But when I say LMS and someone's showing it to me, I have like an expectation that there's like this 95% of things that it's going to do. And it should do that. And maybe it has like this extra thing it does here and there, but there's like all LMSs basically function the same way now. because I use a bunch of them with my company. We're always using different ones with clients, and they are all pretty much exactly the same. All right. Oh, and I already said this one kind of with another topic, but most training out there is boring. When I see like I have to take like a computer-based training, I'm usually like, oh, smacking my head against the wall because I know it's going to be so bad. It's really sad that expectation is there. It's almost like we've been conditioned to know or think that training is going to be boring, so that's what we expect. So when we see boring training from an instructional designer, we're actually we accept that. So that's something that I don't like, but yeah, it's there. I love when I actually get like a good quality course. It's awesome. Next thing I've learned, and this goes along with this one, many IDs do not know how to actually get people to learn something. Craziest thing. I just find that the delivery strategy, the way that we actually get someone to learn in our training, I don't see it a lot. I take like a lot of computer-based training out there, and a lot of times it's just a presentation. We're just presenting content. There's no learning in it. Where's the learning? Where is the learning? I think that we have forgotten. That's why most of this training is boring that I'm taking, because there's no learning in it. It's just someone presenting me content. That's it. No learning. Oh, I got a knowledge check in there. That's one bad, like not bad. It's just a way to get people to remember like factual information. That's not necessarily, and that's not like the be all end all learning strategy. Get me to learn. All right. Next thing I've learned, our field is really small. Like our field is super small still. We're like a really, 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 really small field. How can I tell you that? So like, let me just give you an example. When I do a video on like how to use something in Photoshop or about like the Apple Watch or Garmin watch, I'll get like 200,000 hits or more. When I do a video on like instructional design, I'm lucky if I get a few hundred hits, maybe up to 1,000. I've talked to some like of the top authors in our field, top authors in our field, who've told me that really good book sales are somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 copies. That's like the best, most sold out authors in our field have sold 10,000 copies of a book. That's like mind-boggling to me that that's all it is. Think about that, 10,000 copies. I put something I do an interview on the radio and I get 10,000 copies. I get more than that on a blog, but like everything. Our field is really small. Just interesting. It's not good or bad. I mean, I wish it was bigger, but that means that there's more pie for all of us, but it also means like that pie is a lot smaller and people don't know what we really do. Even though our field is small, it has definitely continued to grow. It has grown in the last 20 years by a lot. When I first started, like I remember I was at MetLife and I was on their training team, actually. I was on their process engineering team doing process engineering. But I was doing a training project for them and I met with their training team and they weren't familiar with instructional design. They were just a training team, not familiar with instructional design. And now I find it much more rare that I go to companies and they don't know what ID is. Even if their trainer is like an HR and doesn't have an ID background, they at least that when I talk to that trainer, they're very familiar with ID. Next thing, I find that there's a huge, and this is the last thing, disconnect between research and practice. Big disconnect between research and practice. The conferences are different. The researchers aren't going to the practitioner conferences and vice versa. The practitioners aren't reading the research, mostly because it's not free and it's all hidden behind paywall journals. And I find that the researchers aren't really asking questions that practitioners care about. There's just a big disconnect. And I find that practitioners aren't reading even the old research to see what they should be doing when they practice. There's just a big disconnect between research and practice in ID. And it's mind-boggling to me, and it doesn't benefit anyone. I'll give you an example. Like I wrote a research paper, and I was one of the things I wrote in the paper was that, one of the reasons, and this was just one of the reasons I'm asking this question, is that companies spend billions of dollars a year doing this, so we should know if it actually is effective or not. And the reviewer of the journal sent me, part of their review back to me was that it shouldn't matter that we're spending billions of dollars or doing this. That doesn't mean it's important. It's like, that's exactly why it's important, because we're doing it so much and preaching it in our grad programs and doing it. We should absolutely know if it actually works. Wouldn't that be good? Like, does ID work? Like, shouldn't we know the answer to that question? But like, we don't. So yeah, I just actually asked, does ID work? How effective is instructional design? I don't know the answer to that, how effective it is. Overall, like, I don't know. So yeah, we need to be able to answer that kind of question. And I've asked that question to a lot of different people and stumped them. We can like break it down and start to talk through it, but like we don't have just like an answer. So yeah, there's a big disconnect between research and practice, and I would love to solve that, but I'm one person. I don't know if I can. I don't even know the solution necessarily. I try to put myself between these two areas. I'm a practitioner, I'm a professor, I do research and try to do everything a little bit, but it's really difficult to even try to fit in to either of the areas when you're trying to do all of it. So it's an interesting dilemma. And I really wonder, like, if other fields like science and engineering and stuff have the same kind of problem that we do in that regard. So anyway, those are my things. I know that was more than 20 things. It was like 25 or something like that, of things that I've noticed in the field over the last 20 years. And I thought it was cool. I want to start doing a lot more reflecting on the field and things that I've observed over time, and just notice things that have changed, because I think that's really cool, and that's cool history that we need to be aware of. So hope you enjoyed. Later, everybody.